All right, let's jump right in, shall we? Today it's bebop.
Ooh, bebop.
Yeah. Get ready for some tempos that'll make your head spin, some crazy harmonies, and a whole lot of just pure musical innovation.
A lot of energy in bebop, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got some interesting sources lined up to guide our deep dive today. We've got this really in-depth academic paper, kind of dissecting all the elements of bebop.
Sounds thorough.
Yeah, it's pretty dense. But then we've got this other piece that's a little more out there, a little more philosophical, exploring this whole concept of the beat in music.
I'm intrigued. How do those two connect?
Well, that's what we're going to find out, right? By the end of this, you'll know what makes bebop tick, get to know some of the people who made it all happen.
The legends.
Yeah, the legends. And maybe even start to think about music, like in a whole new way. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's start with the basics. What exactly is bebop?
Ugh, the million-dollar question. Well, imagine jazz, but then like someone hit the fast-forward button. Bebop kind of took off in the 1940s. Think, fast tempos, super complex harmonies, really intricate melodies. It was a huge departure from like that smooth, danceable swing music that was popular before.
Yeah, this paper keeps mentioning this guy, Charlie Bird Parker, saxophonist.
Oh, Bird!
Apparently he was just like pushing the boundaries of jazz, right? Using all these like crazy chords.
9th, 11th, 13th.
Yeah, like stuff most musicians wouldn't even dream of back then.
Right. He wasn't just playing the chords. He was like reimagining them, using all those complex harmonies to create the sound that was like both intellectually stimulating and just viscerally thrilling.
I'm reading here that even the word bebop itself comes from the music.
It does. It's onomatopoeic.
Like what?
Bebop musicians would often play this like two-note phrase, a call and response thing that just sounds like bebop.
So the music like literally named itself.
Pretty much.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so complex chords, crazy fast tempos. We're starting to get a picture here.
Yeah, it's an intense ride.
What else sets bebop apart?
Oh, the rhythm section is a whole different animal in bebop. In swing, the whole band would kind of swing together, right? But in bebop, the bass and the drums, particularly the drummer's ride cymbal, they lock into this steady, relentless beat, like a pulse. And against that, you've got all these other instruments just weaving in and out with these super intricate melodies and improvisations.
It sounds kind of like controlled chaos.
In a way, yeah. It's like organized chaos. All of this complexity, but somehow it all works together. It's really something.
Okay, so this is where things get kind of interesting. This paper says a lot of these bebop tunes, they were actually based on like existing popular songs.
Right. That's called contrafacting.
Contrafact.
Yeah. Bebop musicians would take the chord structure of a, well-known tune and let's say bebopify it. Faster tempos, more complex harmonies, and then, of course, all that wild improvisation. It's like taking a familiar blueprint and then building something totally new on top of it.
So kind of like musical remixing.
Exactly.
Okay, I like that. So are there any like specific examples of this?
Tons. One of the most famous ones is Charlie Parker's Anthropology. It's based on the chords from, get this, I Got Rhythm.
No way.
Yeah, by George Gershwin. Those chords became so popular in bebop that they're just called rhythm changes now.
Anthropology is like the bebop version of I Got Rhythm.
You got it.
That's brilliant.
And there are others too, like Ornithology,
Right.
which is based on How High the Moon. And Hot House, it uses the chords from Cole Porter's What Is This Thing Called Love?
Oh, wow. I would never have guessed.
Even the classic Donna Lee actually built on Back Home Again in Indiana.
So they were like borrowing these chord structures, but then like completely transforming them.
Yeah, exactly. Adding their own spice.
Adding their own genius. I mean, part of it was about pushing boundaries, right?
Showing off a little, maybe.
Showing off a lot, maybe. But there might have been another reason, too. A lot of these early bebop recordings were made on, like, small independent labels. They didn't have a ton of money.
Right.
So using existing chord changes might have been a way to avoid, like, copyright fees.
Ooh, that's a good point.
For the popular songs.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, especially when you consider what was going on in the world at the time. Post-World War II, things were changing fast. A lot of creative energy, but also a lot of economic uncertainty.
Exactly. And that post-war context, it really feeds into the next part of our deep dive, the lives of the musicians themselves. This paper actually takes a look at 40 bebop musicians.
40 of them.
Yeah, and it's honestly kind of a mixed bag. On the one hand, you've got all this like genius and creativity, but on the other hand, there's some real struggles. For example, the paper mentions a really high rate of heroin addiction among these musicians, over 50%. Wow, over half. That's a scary number.
Yeah, it's important to remember that heroin use was pretty widespread in the jazz scene after World War II.
I see.
It was a difficult time.
Yeah.
And for a lot of these musicians, the music was their escape, their way of coping.
Right.
But, as jazz gained more mainstream acceptance, younger musicians started to see, like, the devastating effects of addiction on their idols.
Oh, yeah?
And heroin use started to decline.
Yeah.
The tragic experiences of some kind have served as a warning to others.
It's just a reminder that behind all that amazing music, there were real people.
Exactly.
Real people with real struggles.
Absolutely. I mean, we can't romanticize it.
Right, it wasn't all glamorous.
Yeah.
So, it wasn't just heroin, though, right?
Right.
This paper, it also looks at other mental health challenges. So how did that compare to other musicians? Like, say, classical musicians at the time?
That's where it gets interesting. They actually compared rates of mood disorders, psychotic illness, alcohol problems between jazz and classical musicians.
Okay, so what did they find?
Actually, the rates were really similar.
Really?
Both groups face these challenges at comparable rates. It kind of highlights the pressures and vulnerabilities that come with, a life dedicated to music.
No matter what genre.
Exactly.
It makes you think about someone like Miles Davis.
Oh, absolutely.
A true legend.
But he struggled,
He did. Addiction, mental health issues. It's like, even with all that talent and success, the lifestyle, the pressures of the music industry, it took its toll.
It's a powerful reminder. Even the most brilliant artists, they're still human.
They are.
With all the same struggles. It adds another layer to their music, I think.
Absolutely. You're not just hearing the notes, you're hearing the story behind the notes.
Yeah, and all this talk about rhythm sections and bebop, Charlie Parker's incredible drumming, it makes me think about the beat itself.
Ah, yes, the beat.
It's just something we take for granted, when we're listening to music, but there's actually a lot more to it than, like, meets the ear. Oh, yeah, the beat is way more complex than people realize.
Right.
And that's where that second source we mentioned comes in. It dives into this whole concept of playing with the beat.
Okay.
Which bebop musicians were masters of.
This is where I get a little lost, honestly.
Oh.
Like, I can tap my foot to the beat, but then you start talking about playing ahead of the beat, behind the beat.
Right.
And I'm just like, whoa, what?
It's more intuitive than you think.
Yeah.
The key is understanding that the beat isn't like a fixed point in time. It's more like a range.
A range.
Like a target.
Oh, okay.
The true beat is right in the center. That's your bullseye. Playing on the beat, you're hitting that bullseye. But good musicians, they don't just sit on the beat. They play around it.
So if the bullseye is on the beat, where's like ahead and behind in this target analogy?
Playing ahead of the beat, that's like hitting the outer ring of the target. Playing behind the beat, that's getting closer to the center. It's all about where you land in relation to that true beat. And where you choose to land can totally change the feel of the music.
Okay, yeah. I'm starting to get it. But how do musicians actually, like, manipulate the beat?
That's the fun part.
Right?
Playing ahead of the beat, that's hitting the outer ring, right?
Yeah.
It creates a sense of urgency, like you're pushing the music forward.
Okay, yeah.
Think of a drummer like Stuart Copeland from The Police.
Oh, yeah.
His style is very driving, always slightly ahead of the beat. It gives their music that relentless energy.
I can totally hear that.
It's like he's constantly pushing the music forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Creating this feeling of, like, anticipation.
Exactly.
Okay, so what about behind the beat then?
Behind the beat is the opposite. It's more laid back, relax, like you're leaning back into the groove, letting the music breathe.
Oh.
A great example, Dr. John, the New Orleans pianist, singer.
Oh, yeah, I love Dr. John.
His playing often sits just behind the beat. It gives his music that, like, swampy, soulful vibe.
Yeah, it's
like he's almost savoring the notes, letting them linger.
Okay, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
So you've got, like, the driving energy ahead of the beat and then the relaxed behind the beat feel.
Yeah.
But can you, like, do both?
You absolutely can.
Really?
And some musicians, they even do both at the same time.
Wait, what? How is that even possible?
It's a mind-blowing skill.
Right.
It's like juggling multiple rhythms at once, but when it's done well, it creates this, like, incredibly dynamic sound. It's really expressive.
Wow, okay, so I'm seeing how this ties back to bebop now. We've got these crazy fast tempos.
Right.
complex harmonies.
That's a lot.
Now, add this whole other layer of playing with the beat. No wonder bebop sounds so different from anything that came before.
It's like they were pushing boundaries on every level, rhythm and harmony.
Yeah.
And they were creating this like whole new sonic world. And the thing is, they weren't just doing it to be different. There was a real purpose behind it, a real desire to express something new and raw and powerful.
So not just showing off their skills,
Not just that.
but actually using those skills to, like, convey something deeper,
Absolutely.
something about their experiences.
Exactly. And that's what makes bebop so compelling even today.
Right.
It comes from a real place, from the hearts and minds of musicians who were living through a pretty wild time in history.
I think our listeners need a minute to process all of this.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. But there's so much more to explore. We'll be right back.
More bebop to come.
Whoa. Okay. So much to think about. I mean, those numbers about addiction, they're pretty heavy.
Yeah, it's a difficult part of the story, but, it's important to acknowledge it as part of the history.
Absolutely. But shifting gears a bit, I'm curious about the bigger picture. Like, what kind of impact did bebop have on the world? It wasn't just about the music, right?
Oh, no, not at all. Bebop, it was a cultural phenomenon.
It was.
Oh, yeah. Remember, this is post-World War II America, right?
Yeah. Big changes happened.
Huge social shifts. And society was, well, still very segregated back then.
Right.
And jazz, while popular, was often kind of confined to, nightclubs, dance halls.
Right. Certain spaces.
Yeah. But then bebop came along, and with all its, intellectual and artistic depth, it started attracting a different crowd, a more diverse audience, black and white.
So it was breaking down some barriers.
Exactly. It became a symbol of rebellion,
Yeah.
A challenge to the status quo. This wasn't just music to dance to. It was music that demanded to be listened to, appreciated for its complexity.
That's really cool.
It was a way for these musicians, many of whom were marginalized, to express themselves, their experiences.
And that idea of expression, it really resonates with me, especially knowing about the challenges, the addiction, the mental health stuff. It's like the music was an outlet.
Absolutely. A way to channel their struggles into something beautiful, powerful, and that rawness, that emotional depth. It's part of what makes bebop so timeless. It speaks to something universal.
Yeah, I get that. So you said bebop was a symbol of rebellion, but was that just because of the music? Or was there like a deeper social or political element to it?
Well, you have to remember the context, right? This was a time of a lot of racial tension in America.
Right, of course.
For Black musicians, bebop offered them a platform to showcase their virtuosity in a way that challenged stereotypes and prejudices.
Yeah.
It was music that demanded respect, both for the musicians and for the Black community.
That's powerful. Music is a force for change.
Exactly.
So going back to the music itself for a second, one thing I find really fascinating is that idea of contrafacting, right? Taking existing tunes, giving them that bebop twist.
Borrowing, transforming.
Do you think that was also a way for these musicians to connect with each other?
Connect.
Yeah, like create a shared language, a tradition.
That's an interesting thought. I think there's definitely something to that. By using these familiar chord changes, they were building on a shared vocabulary, a musical dialogue, between themselves and the artists who came before.
And in doing so, creating something new.
Exactly. It wasn't just about borrowing, it was about transformation. Taking something old, familiar, and making it fresh, making it theirs.
Like they were taking these existing ideas and saying, okay, we hear you, but we're going to do it our way now.
Yeah. They were reclaiming the musical landscape, making space for new voices, new perspectives. And in that sense, it becomes a powerful act of self-expression.
But as we've been talking about, that freedom, that expression, it often came at a price.
It did.
There's a certain sadness to it, knowing that so many of these musicians, they were creating this groundbreaking music, but also dealing with, those personal demons.
Yeah, the addiction, the mental health struggles. It's a reminder that behind the brilliance, the talent, there were real people with real problems. It adds a layer of complexity to their story, wouldn't you say?
Definitely. But it's also a testament to their resilience, their ability to create beauty, even in the face of all that.
Oh, absolutely. And we can't forget the impact they had on music. Not just jazz, but music as a whole.
You think so?
Oh, yeah. Bebop's influence, you can hear it in so many genres. Rock and roll, funk, hip-hop. It changed the way musicians approached harmony, rhythm, improvisation. It pushed the boundaries of what music could be.
Wow. So even though most people probably don't realize it, they're still being touched by bebop in some way.
In some way, yeah. It's woven into the fabric of modern music.
You know, all this talk about rhythm and innovation, and makes me want to go back to that idea of playing with the beat for a minute. We touched on it earlier.
We did.
But I think it'd be really cool for our listeners to actually hear some examples of how musicians actually do this.
I agree. Let's get specific. Some artists who've really mastered this whole rhythmic tightrope walk, playing ahead and behind the beat to create those incredible grooves.
Okay, I'm ready. Let's hear them. Okay, so where do we start with these examples? I'm ready to have my mind blown by some rhythmic magic.
All right, well, let's pick up where we left off. Remember Stuart Copeland, the Police drummer?
Oh, yeah. Mr. Head of the Beat.
Exactly. He was a master of it. It gives the Police's music that driving energy, like in Message in a Bottle or Roxanne. That hi-hat, it's relentless.
Oh, yeah, I hear it. It's like he's constantly pushing the song forward. So, okay, that's ahead of the beat.
Right.
Now, what about behind the beat?
Okay, well, for that, we got to go to New Orleans. Think Dr. John.
Oh, yeah, Dr. John. His piano playing is so cool.
It's like butter, right? So smooth. His style is a perfect example of behind the beat. Those chords just kind of hang back a little.
Yeah.
It gives the music that relaxed, funky feel, like in right place, wrong time.
Ooh, I love that song. So different from that, like driving intense energy of Stuart Copeland.
Totally.
And what about Al Green?
Oh, man. Al Green's rhythm section. Legendary.
I know, right?
Al Jackson Jr. on drums, Howard Grimes on bass. They were masters of the smooth, soulful groove.
They just make you want to, like, melt into the music.
Exactly. Like in Let's Stay Together. The drums are so laid back, it's almost like they're floating.
Okay, I'm feeling very relaxed right now. So we've got ahead of the beat, behind the beat.
Yeah.
But I thought you said some musicians can do both.
Oh, they can.
At the same time.
At the same time. And for a great example of that, we're going to go to, well, this might surprise you, the Rolling Stones.
The Rolling Stones, really? I wouldn't have thought of them for this.
I know, right? Not exactly jazz, but their rhythmic interplay is amazing. Like in Honky Tonk Women, Keith Richards' guitar playing, it's super laid back, behind the beat.
Right, it's got that loose, kind of sloppy feel. In a good way, though.
Exactly. But here's the thing. Charlie Watts on drums. He's mostly right on the beat, except for the kick drum, which comes in every 2 bars to like anchor everything. So you've got this tension between Keith's laid-back guitar and Charlie's more precise drumming.
So it's like they're playing off each other.
Exactly. It's a rhythmic conversation, pushing and pulling to create that unique groove.
Man, music is so much more complex than I ever realized. It's like this whole secret language.
It is. And playing with the beat, it's like this secret weapon that musicians use to shape the music, the feel, the emotion. It's incredible.
This whole deep dive has been like a revelation. Seriously. Bebop, the musicians, the rhythm, the history, it's all connected.
It is. And we've just scratched the surface. There's so much more to explore, so many amazing artists to discover.
So where should our listeners go from here?
Well, if you're really digging the bebop vibe, you got to check out the pioneers, right? Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, Thelonious Monk, Miles Davis.
The greats.
Their music is like a masterclass in improvisation, harmony, pushing boundaries.
And don't forget to listen for those rhythmic nuances. Pay attention to the drums, how they interact with the other instruments, how they create that groove that makes you move. It's like unlocking a secret code.
Exactly. It's all about active listening. Really tune in. Try to hear those rhythmic conversations happening beneath the surface. It'll change the way you experience music.
Well, on that note, I think it's time for us to wrap up this bebop adventure. Thanks to everyone for tuning in. Keep listening, keep exploring, and most importantly, keep the music alive.
And the beat goes on.